The day I watched my new boss destroy a 9-year career with a single email, I smiled. Not because I was happy, because I knew something he didn't. Something that would change everything in exactly 72 hours. But let me back up. You need to understand how we got here. How someone like Harrison Webb could walk into Zenith Tech and think he owned the place. How he could fire me, Silas Holloway, without reading a single line of my contract. And how that one mistake would cost him everything. It started 3 weeks ago on a Tuesday morning. I was sitting in my usual spot in the main conference room, coffee getting cold, watching our CEO introduce the man who would supposedly save our company. "Everyone, meet Harrison Webb," she said, stepping aside like she was presenting a prize. "He's coming to us from Blue Core Industries with 15 years of executive experience." Harrison stepped forward in his black suit that probably cost more than most people make in a month. His silver watch caught the light as he raised his hand in a wave that felt more like a royal greeting than a hello. "Call me Harry," he said, flashing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "I believe in keeping things simple, fast, and profitable. We're going to do amazing things together." The room filled with that awkward clapping you hear at school assemblies. Forced. Fake. Scared. I stayed quiet, arms crossed, studying his face. I'd been at Zenith Tech for 9 years. I'd survived 3 different CEOs, 5 major layoffs, and a complete system overhaul that nearly killed the company. I knew how to read people like Harrison Webb. He was dangerous. Not because he was smart, but because he thought he was. The first week was a nightmare. Harrison called our weekly project meetings outdated and replaced them with something called vision alignment sessions. Nobody knew what that meant, including him. By Thursday, he'd fired 3 managers. 2 of them got the news by email. Just a simple message. "Your position has been eliminated. Please see HR for your final paperwork." That's when I knew I was next. See, Harrison didn't just dislike our old ways of doing things. He hated anyone who represented them. And I was the biggest reminder of all. I'd been there longer than anyone except the janitor. I knew every system, every process, every shortcut that kept this place running. But here's what Harrison didn't know. What nobody knew except me and the lawyers who helped me file the paperwork 6 years ago. I owned the heart of this company, literally. Back in 2018, when Zenith almost went under after a failed merger, I created something that saved us all. A back-end system that managed everything: customer data, billing, reporting, security, even the coffee machine orders. It took me 8 months of 18-hour days to build it from scratch. The old CEO, Martha Chen, was so grateful she told me something I'll never forget. "Silas, if you ever leave this company, we'll have to beg you to come back." That's when she suggested I patent the system under my own name. "For protection," she said. "Just in case." I thought she was being paranoid. Now I know she was being smart. The patent was buried deep in my employment contract. Just another legal document in a stack of papers most executives never bother reading. It gave Zenith the right to use my system, but only with my permission, and that permission had to be renewed every year. Guess when it expired? This Monday. Guess who forgot to read the fine print? Harrison Webb. The second week got worse. Harrison started calling me tech support, instead of my real title, Director of Systems Architecture. He'd cut me off mid-sentence in meetings and give my ideas to junior employees to present as their own. Classic power moves. Make someone feel small so you can feel big. I documented everything, every insult, every interruption, every time he took credit for my work. I had a feeling I'd need proof later. Then came Friday, the day that changed everything. I was sitting in my office, working on a security update, when Harrison appeared in my doorway. He didn't knock, just leaned against the frame like he was posing for a magazine cover. "Silas, we need to talk," he said in that fake friendly voice bosses use when they're about to ruin your life. I gestured to the chair across from my desk. He didn't sit. "I'm going to be straight with you," he continued, crossing his arms. "You've been here a long time, maybe too long. The company is changing, and we need people who can keep up with our new pace." I raised an eyebrow but said nothing. Let him dig his own grave. "What I'm saying is, your position is no longer needed. We're letting you go, effective immediately. HR has your severance package ready." The words hung in the air like smoke. I leaned back in my chair and really looked at him. This man who thought he could walk into my world and erase 9 years of work with a 5-minute conversation. He had no idea what he'd just done. "I understand," I said, standing up slowly. I held out my hand for a shake. He didn't take it, just nodded like he was already done with me. "I hope you find something that's a better fit," he said, turning to leave. Then he paused at the door and threw one last knife. "Honestly, I'm not sure why the company was paying top dollar for someone who peaked 5 years ago." My smile never wavered. "Good luck, Harry." He looked confused by how calm I was, like he expected me to cry or beg or cause a scene. Instead, I started packing my things while he stood there, probably wondering why this was so easy. I took my time. A small plant I'd somehow kept alive for 3 years. A coffee mug my sister gave me. A USB drive with nothing important on it, just photos from our last team party. As I walked through the office, people stared. Some looked away, embarrassed. Others gave me sympathetic smiles. Nobody said anything. That's how fear spreads in places like this, quietly. By the time I reached my car, my hands were shaking. Not from sadness, from excitement. Because I knew something Harrison didn't. Something that would become very clear on Monday morning. I knew exactly how long it would take for everything to fall apart. The answer was about 3 hours. That weekend felt like the calm before a storm, heavy and electric and full of possibilities. I didn't tell anyone I'd been fired. Not my mum, who always worried I worked too hard. Not my best friend Victor, who would have shown up with ice cream and a plan to key Harrison's car. And definitely not my sister, who always said I cared more about work than people. I needed quiet, space to think, time to plan. Friday night, I took a long walk through downtown, past the closed shops and empty cafes, letting the cool air clear my head. I wasn't sad about losing the job. I was angry about the disrespect. The assumption that someone who'd never written a line of code could judge my worth. By Saturday morning, I was ready to work. I pulled out my employment contract from my personal files. It was buried on page 12 in language only lawyers love. Was buried on page... There it was, buried on page 12 in language only lawyers love. Patent holder retains full rights to architectural system pending annual licensing renewal. The licensing agreement was crystal clear. Zenith could use my system, but only with my written permission. That permission expired every year on the anniversary of the original patent filing, and that anniversary was this Monday. I laughed out loud, not because it was funny, but because the timing was perfect. By Saturday afternoon, I'd written the email that would change everything. I kept it simple, professional, and completely devastating. Subject: Patent license expiration notice. Immediate action required. Dear Legal Department, this serves as formal notice that Zenith Tech's license to use the back-end architecture system, patent mod US 8947521, will expire at 11:59 p.m. on Monday. Per our original agreement, continued use beyond this date without renegotiation constitutes patent infringement. Please contact me directly to discuss renewal terms. Sincerely, Silas Holloway, patent holder, Zenith Backend Architecture System, V3.1. I sent copies to the legal team, the old CTO, and yes, Harrison Webb himself. Then I closed my laptop and went for a run. 5 miles through the city, feeling the tension melt away with every step. Sunday was quiet, too quiet. like the whole world was holding its breath. My phone started buzzing around dinner time. 3 missed calls from numbers I didn't recognize. A voicemail from HR. "Silas, we're hoping to clarify some details about your separation. Please call us back." Another from the legal department. "We need to discuss your contract terms as soon as possible." And finally, late that night, an email from Harrison himself. Subject: contract confusion. "Silas, I think there's been a misunderstanding about your employment agreement. I'd like to speak with you first thing Monday morning to clear this up. Please call me ASAP. Harrison Webb." There it was. Panic wrapped in corporate speak. I didn't respond. Let him sweat. Let him spend Sunday night wondering what he'd missed. Let him come to work Monday morning and find out the hard way. I went to bed early, setting 3 alarms. I wanted to be awake for the show. Monday morning came like a sunrise after the longest night. I was up at 5 a.m., coffee brewing, laptop open, phone charged and ready. I sat on my couch in sweatpants and an old college hoodie, watching the clock tick toward 8 a.m. The official start of Zenith's workday. At 8 o'clock exactly, I knew what was happening. Employees across the building were trying to log into systems that no longer recognized their access. Customer service reps were staring at blank screens. The billing department couldn't process payments. Even the automated coffee orders were failing. At 8:07, my email exploded. Urgent. System access denied. Back-end authentication error. Need help ASAP. Silas, please call me now. Harrison. Then came a text from Violet, a friend in customer support. "Did you do this? Please tell me you did this. Harrison is losing his mind. Every system is down. Clients are calling non-stop. The board got pulled into an emergency meeting." I smiled, but not from meanness, from clarity. This wasn't sabotage. This was what happened when people in power made decisions without understanding the consequences. When they threw away valuable people like yesterday's coffee. At 8:31, my phone rang. This time I answered. "Silas?" Harrison's voice cracked through the speaker. He was trying to sound calm, but I could hear the panic underneath. "We need to talk. I had no idea about the patent situation. Let's get you back in the office," and I cut him off gently. "I'm happy to talk, Harry, but not about a job. I'm a consultant now. We're discussing licensing fees." Silence. "Silas," he said again, his voice dropping. "Let's not make this personal." "Oh," I replied sweetly. "It's not personal. It's business." Then I hung up. And that's when the real negotiation began. I walked into the Zenith building at 9:15 a.m., but not like before. Not through the employee entrance with my head down and my laptop bag cutting into my shoulder. I walked through the front lobby like I owned the place, because in a way, I did. My shoes clicked against the marble floor, each step echoing in the sudden quiet. The receptionist's eyes went wide when she saw me. "Mr. Holloway," she stammered. I thought—" "I have a meeting with legal," I said with a smile. "They're expecting me." She nodded quickly and picked up her phone. Her hand was shaking slightly as she dialed. I could feel the entire lobby watching me. Employees pretending to check their phones while stealing glances. Security guards whispering to each other. Even the elevator music seemed to pause. "They said to take the elevator to the 7th floor, the receptionist said. "Conference room B." As the elevator doors closed, I caught my reflection in the polished metal. Confident, unshaken, ready. But inside, my heart was racing. Not from fear, from pure adrenaline. This was it. The moment I'd show them exactly what they'd thrown away. When I entered the conference room, the energy was thick with tension. 3 lawyers sat around a table that usually hosted birthday parties and retirement celebrations. Today it felt like a courtroom. Harrison wasn't there. Smart move. This was bigger than him now. "Silas," the head lawyer began, standing to shake my hand. "Thank you for coming in. We want to resolve this quickly and fairly." "Of course," I replied, taking a seat at the far end of the table. "I assume you've reviewed the licensing agreement?" He nodded. "Your claims are valid," The patent is registered under your name, and our right to use the system expired as stated. A pause. Then he leaned forward like he was about to offer me a gift. We'd like to propose a 1-year extension. Same terms as before. Full system access. I almost laughed. They still didn't get it. That won't work for me, I said calmly. The room went quiet. One lawyer scribbled something in her notebook. Another adjusted his glasses. I'm not here to accept the same deal that got us into this mess, I continued. I'm here to negotiate something fair. You're currently experiencing complete system failure, correct? They exchanged glances. Finally, the head lawyer nodded. Yes. It's affecting all customer-facing platforms, internal reporting and employee access. Then let's talk numbers, I said, opening my folder. I want $800,000 for the next 12 months, renewable every 6 months. I provide full system support through my own consulting team, and I want public acknowledgement of my patent in all company materials. The silence stretched like a held breath. That's significantly more than your previous salary, one lawyer finally said. It's significantly less than what you'll lose if this continues, I replied. Every hour of downtime costs you money, customers, and reputation. I'd advise moving quickly. They couldn't argue with that. At 10:15, while I waited outside the conference room with a bottle of water and my phone on silent, I saw Harrison pacing the hallway like a caged animal. When he finally spotted me, his face went through about 5 different emotions. Confusion, anger, disbelief, and finally something that looked like fear. He walked over slowly, hands in his pockets, trying to look casual. Silas, he said, forcing his voice to sound friendly. I didn't expect you'd come in person. No, Harry, I replied evenly. You didn't expect a lot of things. I think this has gotten out of hand. We should have had a conversation before lawyers got involved. You mean before you fired me? He shifted uncomfortably. That decision was based on incomplete information. No, I said, standing up. That decision was based on arrogance, and now you're dealing with the consequences. He started to say something else, but I was done listening. I'm not angry, Harry. I'm just done being underestimated. You can either let the lawyers handle this professionally, or you can watch your company crumble while you figure out what you should have known from day one. I walked past him toward the conference room. Oh, and Harry, I said, turning back with that same smile from Friday. Good luck. That word again. Luck. Something he was going to need a lot more of. By noon, the conference room was packed. Not just lawyers now, but executives I recognized from the board. The energy had shifted from cautious to desperate. What started as a simple contract dispute had become a company-wide crisis. Stock prices were dropping, customers were threatening to leave, and everyone was finally understanding what one person's knowledge was really worth. I didn't flinch. If anything, I felt calmer than I had in weeks. The head lawyer looked tired. His tie was loose, his confident smile replaced by something closer to panic. We've reviewed your proposal, he began carefully. The board finds the terms aggressive. Accurate, I corrected. He paused, nodded. Accurate. We're prepared to accept the licensing fee and the public acknowledgement, but we'd like to phrase the recognition as technical collaboration rather than full patent credit. I leaned forward. No. His eyebrows shot up. Excuse me. I want it stated clearly and publicly. System designed and patented by Silas Holloway. No corporate speak. No watered-down language. This company has run on my work for 6 years. Everyone benefited from it. I'm not walking away anonymous so Harrison can save face. The room went dead quiet. You could hear the air conditioning humming. Someone's phone buzzed. A car honked outside. Finally, the head lawyer cleared his throat. We'll need to take that to the board. You do that, I said, standing and gathering my papers. And while you're at it, I'd suggest being completely honest about how this happened. Because if I have to explain to federal regulators why your systems failed due to patent violations, that's a conversation nobody wants to have. That landed like a bomb, because that's the game nobody talks about in public. How a single system's failure can trigger investigations, audits, stock penalties, and worse. I knew their playbook better than they thought, and now I had my own. As I walked toward the elevator, I saw Violet waiting by the coffee machine. She gave me a look that was half shock, half admiration. "They're calling you the firewall upstairs," she whispered with a grin. I smiled. "Better than being called redundant." She laughed, then leaned closer. "Everyone's talking, Silas. Harrison is in full panic mode, telling the board this was all a big misunderstanding. Claiming you never told anyone about the license expiration." "He's lying," I said calmly. "But let him talk. The truth doesn't need volume." Violet's eyes lit up. "Everyone saw the email you sent. You copied legal before the deadline. There's a paper trail a mile long. Even the interns are talking about it like it's some kind of corporate legend." I didn't respond right away. My mind was already moving to the next phase, because getting my money back wasn't enough. I wanted something bigger. I wanted change. The rest of Monday was a waiting game. I went home, ordered takeout, and watched the sun set over the city while my phone buzzed with increasingly frantic messages. By Tuesday morning, I was ready for round 2. This time, I didn't just email the lawyers. I went straight to the top. The board chair had worked with me on a special project 2 years ago, and I still had her direct contact. Subject: system crisis, leadership failure, and next steps. Dear Board, I wanted to provide context for yesterday's licensing discussion. This isn't just about contract terms. It's about leadership failure that put your entire company at risk. Harrison Webb fired your chief systems architect without reviewing internal intellectual property obligations. He then attempted to blame others when his oversight created a crisis. If this is how he handles internal resources, how will he manage external partners, vendors, or regulatory oversight? The system failure wasn't caused by contract disputes. It was caused by poor leadership and due diligence. I'm happy to discuss this further at your convenience. Professionally, Silas Holloway. By that afternoon, I had my response. Not from the board chair, but from her assistant. "Mr. Holloway, the board appreciates your professionalism and clarity. We take these concerns seriously and will be reviewing all aspects of recent leadership decisions. We support the licensing arrangement under your proposed terms and expect finalization within 24 hours. We regret that the company's leadership failed to recognize your contributions appropriately. Sincerely, Board of Directors, Zenith Technologies." I stared at the email for a long moment, then leaned back in my chair. It wasn't a public apology, but it was something better. It was accountability. That night, Violet texted me again. "Harrison's freaking out. Emergency board meeting tomorrow morning. His assistant said he's been making calls all night trying to control the story." I typed back slowly. "Let him try. I've got truth and documentation. That's better than spin." Wednesday would be more than a licensing deal. It would be a reckoning, and I was ready for both. Wednesday morning arrived like Judgment Day. I was dressed in my best navy suit, the one I'd bought for my promotion 3 years ago, but never got to wear to the celebration dinner that never happened. Today felt like the right occasion. At exactly 9 a.m., I walked into Zenith's executive boardroom on the top floor. A room I'd only been in twice before, once to present a security upgrade that saved the company millions, and once to receive a team player award that came with a handshake and no raise. Today was different. Today, I wasn't the helpful employee in the corner taking notes. I was the reason they were all here. The boardroom was full. 8 board members, the head lawyer, 2 executives I recognized, and sitting at the far end looking like he'd aged 5 years in 3 days, Harrison Webb. His perfect suit was wrinkled. His confident smile had been replaced by something that looked like barely controlled panic. His phone sat face down on the table like evidence he wasn't allowed to touch. The board chair, Patricia Morse, stood when I entered. "Silas, thank you for joining us. Please take a seat." She gestured to a chair directly across from Harrison. The symbolism wasn't lost on anyone. As I sat down, I caught Harrison's eye. He looked away first. "Before we begin," Patricia continued, "I want to say that the board has reviewed all documentation related to this situation. Your patent claims, the licensing timeline, and the events leading to Monday's system failure." She paused, looking directly at Harrison. "We've also reviewed the circumstances of your termination." Harrison shifted in his seat but stayed quiet. Smart. Anything he said now would only make things worse. "Silas," Patricia turned back to me, "we'd like to hear your perspective on what happened and what you think needs to change going forward." I stood up slowly, my hands steady, my voice clear. "Leadership isn't about control," I began, looking at each board member. "It's about understanding. Understanding your systems, your people, and your responsibilities." I turned slightly toward Harrison. "When someone walks into a company they don't understand, they have two choices: listen and learn, or bulldoze and hope for the best." Harrison chose to bulldoze. The room was dead silent. He called me incompetent and fired me without cause. But worse than that, he ignored the legal foundations that keep this company running. He made decisions based on ego instead of information. I paused, letting that sink in. I didn't create this crisis to prove a point. This crisis happened because Harrison didn't do his job. He didn't read contracts. He didn't understand our systems. He didn't value the people who built them. One board member leaned forward. "What would you do differently if you were in his position?" I smiled slightly. I wouldn't be in his position. I'd hire someone who understands technology, respects existing teams, and reads the fine print before making life-changing decisions for other people. Another board member spoke up. "What do you need from us to move forward?" "I need the licensing deal we discussed. I need public recognition for my work. And I need assurance that this company will never again fire someone without understanding what they actually do." Patricia nodded. "And if we agree to those terms? Then I'll help you build systems to make sure this never happens again. Not just technical systems, cultural ones. Ways to protect employees from leadership mistakes. Ways to ensure people get credit for their contributions." I sat back down. "But I won't be coming back as an employee. Those days are over." Harrison finally spoke up, his voice tight with desperation. "This is all based on a misunderstanding. I never had access to all the contract details. Legal should have stop." Patricia's voice cut through his excuses like a knife. "We've heard enough." She turned to the other board members. "I think we're ready to vote." What happened next was swift and brutal. "All in favor of accepting Mr. Holloway's licensing terms in full?" 8 hands went up. "All in favor of issuing a public statement acknowledging her contributions?" 8 hands again. "All in favor of placing Harrison Webb on immediate administrative leave pending full review?" This time, Harrison's hand was the only one that stayed down. Patricia looked at him with something between pity and disgust. "Harrison, please clear out your office. Security will escort you." He started to protest, but she held up her hand. "This meeting is adjourned." As Harrison was led out by security, he looked back at me one last time. Not with anger, but with something like understanding. Finally, he got it. But it was too late. After he left, Patricia walked over to where I was sitting. "Silas," she said quietly, "you didn't just save our systems. You saved our company." I nodded. "I know. What you did took courage. Standing up to bad leadership, protecting your work, demanding respect. That's not easy." "It shouldn't be rare either," I replied. She smiled. "No, it shouldn't. Which is why we want to work with you on something bigger than just licensing." That afternoon I sat in the same conference room where this all started. But now I was the one setting the terms. I want to create a protection program, I explained to the legal team and 2 board members. A system that safeguards employee innovations and prevents leadership abuse. I opened my laptop and pulled up the presentation I'd been working on since Tuesday night. First, automatic intellectual property reviews during any leadership transition. No new executive can make personnel decisions without understanding what patents, systems, or innovations are tied to specific employees. Nods around the table. Second, anonymous reporting system that goes directly to the board, not through management. If someone feels their work is being stolen, or they're being targeted unfairly, they have a direct line to the top. More nods. Third, mandatory credit attribution for all technical innovations. If someone builds something, their name goes on it. Publicly, no exceptions. One board member leaned forward. How long would you need to implement this? 3 months. I'll work as a consultant, design the systems, train the staff, and make sure everything's bulletproof before I transition out. And after that, I smiled. After that, I start my own consulting firm. I'll help other companies build the same protections. Because what happened to me, it happens everywhere. And it needs to stop. The next week moved like a dream I'd been having for years, but never thought would come true. The public announcement went out on Friday afternoon. Zenith Technologies formally acknowledges Silas Holloway as the architect and patent holder of our core infrastructure system. Her innovation and expertise have been fundamental to our success for 6 years. Additionally, Harrison Webb has been placed on administrative leave pending review of recent leadership decisions. We are implementing new policies to ensure all employee contributions are recognized and protected. The response was immediate and overwhelming. My LinkedIn inbox exploded with messages from men in tech sharing their own stories. Women too, talking about times they'd been overlooked or pushed aside by new management. One message stood out from a junior developer named Marcus who'd started at Zenith just 6 months ago. What you did changed everything here. People are actually speaking up in meetings now. They're not afraid to disagree with managers or suggest better ways to do things. You didn't just get justice for yourself, you made it safer for all of us. But the message that hit me hardest came from my old boss, Martha Chen. Silas, I always knew you were special, but watching you stand up for yourself and then use that victory to protect others, that's true leadership. I'm proud of you. 3 months later, I stood in the lobby of Zenith Technologies for the last time as a consultant. The place looked different. Not physically, same marble floors, same glass elevators, but energetically. People walked taller. They made eye contact. They smiled. Violet met me at the elevator with a huge grin. You're not going to believe this, she said as we rode up to the 7th floor. They're calling the new policies the Holloway Protocols. It's already being implemented at 3 other companies. I laughed. That's ridiculous. No, it's not. It's perfect. When the elevator doors opened, I was greeted by something I never expected. Applause. The entire 7th floor, maybe 40 people, were clapping. Not the forced, scared clapping from Harrison's first day. Real applause. The kind that means something. In the front row stood Marcus, the young developer who'd messaged me. Next to him was Janet from accounting, who'd always been too quiet in meetings. Behind them were faces I recognized and some I didn't, all looking at me like I'd done something incredible. Speech, someone called out. I shook my head, laughing. I'm not good at speeches. You're good at a lot of things, Janet said. Try it. So I did. 6 months ago, I thought my value came from being useful to other people, from making their jobs easier, their systems better, their problems disappear. The room was quiet now, listening. But I learned something important. Your value doesn't come from what you do for others. It comes from knowing who you are and never letting anyone convince you you're worth less than that. I looked around the room at all these faces, some young, some experienced, all dealing with their own challenges and dreams. Don't wait for permission to be valued. Don't accept being invisible because it's easier than fighting. And don't ever let someone else define what you're worth. The applause started again, but I held up my hand. Most importantly, when you get the chance to lift someone else up, take it. Because the best revenge against people who try to keep you small is helping others refuse to shrink. That got the biggest applause of all. Later that day, I cleaned out the temporary office they'd given me for the consulting work. Just a few personal items, the same plant that had somehow survived everything, a new coffee mug that said patent pending, and a framed copy of the first Holloway Protocol implementation at a startup in Seattle. As I was packing, Patricia Morse knocked on the door. "Got a minute?" she asked. "Of course." She sat down across from my desk, the same setup I'd had during that awful conversation with Harrison 6 months ago. But everything was different now. "I wanted to thank you," she said, "not just for the licensing deal or the protocols you built, for showing us what real leadership looks like. I just stood up for myself." "No," she said firmly. "You stood up for everyone who couldn't. You took a personal attack and turned it into systemic change. That's rare." She handed me an envelope. "What's this?" "A recommendation letter. For when clients ask about your consulting work, it might come in handy." I opened it and read the first line. "Silas Holloway doesn't just solve problems. She transforms the systems that create them." My eyes got a little watery. "Thank you. Thank you for showing us that intelligence and integrity can beat arrogance and power. Every time." That evening, I sat in my apartment, the same apartment I'd lived in throughout this whole journey, and opened my laptop. Time to build something new. I'd already had inquiries from 12 companies wanting help with employee protection protocols. 3 startups asked about patent consulting. A law firm wanted me to speak at their conference about intellectual property in the tech industry. But the message that excited me most came from Dr. Lila Patel, a researcher at Stanford. "I've been following your story through industry contacts. I'm working on a study about workplace innovation and credit attribution. Would you be interested in helping develop a framework that companies could use nationally? This could become the standard." I typed back immediately. "Absolutely. When do we start?" 6 months after that terrible Friday when Harrison fired me, I had my own consulting firm, Holloway Systems. My first client was a company whose CTO had been forced out by a new CEO who didn't understand the technical infrastructure. Sound familiar? My second client was a startup where 3 women had built the core product but weren't listed as co-founders. We fixed that. My third client was Zenith Technologies. They wanted help expanding the Holloway protocols to their international offices. The irony was perfect. 1 year later, I got an unexpected email. Subject: "Congratulations, Silas. I heard about your consulting success and wanted to reach out. I know our last interaction wasn't ideal, and I've had time to reflect on my mistakes at Zenith. You were right about everything. I didn't understand the company, the systems, or the people. I made decisions based on assumptions instead of information. I've been working with an executive coach and taking courses in technology management. I'm trying to become the kind of leader I should have been from the beginning. I don't expect forgiveness or even a response. I just wanted you to know that what happened taught me something important about respect, preparation, and humility. I hope you're doing well. Harrison Webb." I stared at the email for a long time. Then I did something that surprised even me. I wrote back, "Harrison, thank you for reaching out. It takes courage to admit mistakes and work to fix them. I hope you've learned that good leadership starts with understanding. Understanding your people, your systems, and your own limitations. I'm glad you're putting in the work to grow. Best of luck, Silas." I meant it. Because the best revenge isn't destruction. It's transformation. His transformation, the company's transformation, and most importantly, my own. 2 years after the day Harrison Webb walked into Zenith Technologies, thinking he could erase my 9 years of work with a 5-minute conversation, I stood on stage at the Tech Leadership Summit in San Francisco. The audience was full of executives, engineers, and entrepreneurs, people from every level of the industry I'd spent my career in. My presentation was titled "The Patent Trap: How One Fired Employee Changed Corporate Culture Forever." But as I looked out at those faces, I realized the real story wasn't about patents or revenge or even justice. It was about something simpler and more powerful: knowing your worth and never letting anyone convince you to accept less. How many of you have ever felt invisible at work? I asked the audience. Hundreds of hands went up. How many have had ideas stolen or been pushed aside by new management? Even more hands. How many have been told you're not valuable enough, not current enough, not essential enough? The sea of hands was overwhelming. "Here's what I learned," I said, my voice carrying to the back of the room. "Your value isn't determined by other people's ability to see it. It's determined by your willingness to stand up for it." I told them about Harrison, about the patent, about the 3 days that changed everything. But I also told them about what came after: the protocols, the consulting firm, the other companies we'd helped, the culture changes spreading across the industry. The best revenge, I concluded, isn't making someone pay for underestimating you. It's making sure they never get the chance to underestimate anyone else. The standing ovation lasted 5 minutes. Afterward, as I was packing up my presentation materials, a young woman approached me. She looked nervous but determined. "Mr. Holloway," she said, "I'm Ethan. I'm a software engineer at a startup in Oakland." "Nice to meet you, Ethan." "My new manager is trying to take credit for a security system I built. He's telling investors it was his innovation. I don't know what to do." I handed him my business card. "Call me Monday. We'll figure it out." His face lit up. "Really? Really? And Ethan?" "Yes?" "You don't have to accept being invisible. Not anymore." As I walked out of the conference center into the San Francisco sunshine, my phone buzzed with a text from Violet. "Saw your presentation online. Harrison would be proud." Just kidding. He'd probably cry. "You're changing the world, one patent at a time." I laughed out loud, startling a passing businessman. That night, I sat in my hotel room overlooking the bay and opened my journal. I'd been writing in it every week since the day Harrison fired me, documenting not just what happened, but how it felt to fight back and win. I wrote one final entry. Today I realized something important. This story was never about Harrison Webb or Zenith Technologies, or even the patent that started it all. It was about the moment I stopped asking for permission to be valued and started insisting on it. It was about learning that the most powerful thing you can do isn't getting revenge on people who hurt you. It's making sure they can't hurt anyone else. It was about discovering that your worst professional moment can become your greatest opportunity if you're brave enough to turn pain into purpose. And it was about understanding that sometimes the best way to change the world isn't to ask nicely for a seat at the table. It's to build your own table and invite everyone who's been standing in the corner to sit down. To anyone reading this who's ever been told they're not enough, not valuable, not essential, you are wrong. And if they fire you for being right, well, light the match. I closed the journal and looked out at the city lights, thinking about all the Zaras out there who needed to know they didn't have to accept being invisible. Tomorrow, I'd help another one find her voice, and that felt like the best revenge of all. 3 years later, the Holloway Protocols have been implemented at over 200 companies worldwide. Harrison Webb completed his executive coaching program and now works as a mid-level manager at a non-profit, where by all accounts he's become the thoughtful, prepared leader he should have been from the beginning. Silas Holloway's consulting firm has grown to 12 employees and specializes in workplace equity and innovation protection. Sometimes the best stories don't end with destruction. They end with transformation.